This is Discovering the Scriptures with Dr. Peter John Parisis. Currently, we're in Daniel chapter 2, verse 25. Reading from the King James Bible, quote, Then Arioch brought in Daniel before the king in haste, and said unto him, I have found a man of the captives of Judah, that will make known unto the king the interpretation. Unquote. Reading from the Young's Literal Translation, quote, Then Arioch in haste has brought up Daniel before the king, and thus hath said to him, I have found a man of the sons of the removed of Judah, who the interpretation of the king doth make known. Unquote. Now let's look at the raw interlinear translation. To him said, and thus king thee before Daniel brought quickly Arioch, then to the king interpretation thee, who Judah, that captives of thee, the captives of a man I have found of, will make known. Unquote. So again, now let's look at the ESV version of this one. Quote, Then Arioch brought in Daniel before the king in haste, and said thus to him, I have found among the exiles from Judah a man who will make known to the king the interpretation. Unquote. Now let's look at the inner part of this verse by looking at the parsing of the Aramaic, and you'll understand why I read the verse the way I did. Then Arioch brought in, so let's parse out brought in. That is an APO stem, which is a causative conjunction, and it's a perfect aspect, which means it's completed. Brought in Daniel before the king in haste. Now let's go ahead and do that one. That's an IPL stem, which is like reflective action and kind of casual but reflective. And it's an infinite aspect, so you can just add ing to the end of it basically. And said, let's parse that out. It's a PL stem, which represents basically a casual action of the root, and its perfect aspect, so it's completed. And said, thus, unto him I have found. Now let's parse that out. Now that's an HBL stem, and its perfect aspect, so it's completed. And this is a causative conjunction, is what this is. But it is also completed, because you remember the aspect's perfect. A man of the captives of Judah that will make known. Let's parse that out. That's an APO stem again. And that is a causative conjunction, imperfect aspect, so it's not completed, unto the king, the interpretation. That's the parsing of this verse. Now, let's see what we have as far as commentaries go on this verse and see what we can dig out of this verse here. Okay, reading John Gill's commentary, quote, Then Arioch, remember that is the captain of the guards, it's not his name, brought in Daniel before the king in haste, as knowing how impatient the king was to have his dream and the interpretation of it told him, and how pleasing this would be to him, and be the means of ingratiating and establishing him in his affections, as well as for the sake of saving the lives of the wise men. And said thus unto him, I have found a man of the captives of Judah, as if he had made it his business to inquire after a man capable of answering the king's demands, whereas he sought after Daniel at first, not for this purpose, but to destroy him. And now Daniel made his application to him for introduction to the king, and was not looked after by Arioch, but he here did as courtiers do, make the most of everything to their own advantage, to insinuate themselves into the favor of the princes. It looks by this as if Arioch did not know of Daniel's having been with the king before, and of the promise he had made him, that granting him time, he would satisfy him in the matter requested. which he was now ready to do, as he told Arioch, and therefore he adds, that will make known unto the king the interpretation, that is, of his dream. Unquote. Now, I do think that John Gill does have a point here, that Arioch probably did not know that Daniel had been before the king to make a request for time. And even if he did or didn't, what's going to follow with the rewards that are given, notice the lack of what's going to happen to Arioch. There's no mention at all of any kind of reward to Arioch at all. Whether that was just not important in Daniel's scripting of this whole thing or not, we don't know. But he really does his best to look good in front of his boss, the king. But there's no mention more of him after all this. So we don't really know. And we're only going to go over the truth. So we don't know what's there. We don't know what happened to him, what did not happen to him, but he's not mentioned anymore. So he has fulfilled the purpose in this story, in this verse. So John Gill might be right. He might not have known that Daniel went in front of the king. He might have. We don't really know. Daniel doesn't tell us. But this is where we are right now. There's more to come, and you'll have to wait till the next verse as we get there. May God richly bless you as you study the scriptures. Remember to continue to pray and ask the Holy Spirit to give you knowledge and wisdom as you meditate upon the scriptures throughout the day. God bless.